and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Welcome to the August 30th meeting of the Indiana State Board of Education. I'm going to go ahead and approve the minutes before we welcome our new board member. So can we get a motion to approve the minute of our last board meeting? We have a motion. We have a second? We have a second. Ms. Blackadder, any questions, edits to those minutes? Hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? I'm going to give a kind of a statement on a number of issues, but before we do, I would like to welcome our newest board member. As I think everyone knows, Vicki Snyder retired from the board when she retired from her position as principal at Signature School down in Evansville. So that necessitated us bringing an educator from Evansville. We were fortunate enough to find B.J. Watts, who is a health and social studies teacher in Evansville Vanderburg schools. B.J. has been a teacher for how long, B.J.?
12 years.
12 years. So B.J. will be with us. Actually, just tell a very quick personal story. We were all panicked last month because B.J. was supposed to be here last month, and we were texting, and I said, B.J., where are you? And his wife says he has pancreatitis. He's in the hospital. So he got a pass last month, by the way.
Thank you.
So we're glad he's well. We're glad he's with us. And again, welcome B.J. to the board.
Thank you very much.
I have just a few comments today. Today we have a very important agenda item. And I guess I'm going to say this because this kind of takes us back to a year ago when we made the decisions we made around the schools that did not meet the benchmark and got to the 6th year of our lowest performance category, which last year for the first time was designated as F, necessitating intervention under Public Law 221. And today we have the one school that also reached this benchmark, Marshall in Indianapolis. We will have a discussion about Marshall shortly, but the reason I bring this up is I think the one thing that we have learned is accountability works in this state. And I just want to give some numbers. Since 2005, when the cohort hit for last year's schools to be considered for intervention, we started with 94 schools in the lowest performance category, then called probationary schools. We went from 94 schools in 2005 to 25 in 2008 to actually requiring some type of intervention in 2011 with 7 schools, and today we have a consideration of 1. So the concept that holding schools accountable and schools and communities knowing that the state is serious about its state accountability law has been effective in driving school improvement. And it's effective for not just driving schools to perform better, but driving schools to perform better for students. And that's what this is all about. Again, very granular that this is about the student level. So I just want to say that today is a day much like we had last year. It will be an intense discussion around what's best for John Marshall, the children of John Marshall. I think we have a very creative solution to that end. And I think we in Indiana continue to kind of blaze the trail in how to look at this issue of turning around our lowest performing schools. And I'm proud of that. It's not easy work. I think we are seeing that. No one ever thought it would be easy, but it's the right thing to do. So I just want to remind everyone that the decision we make today on Marshall has been a very thorough discussion. I mean, we have turned over every piece of data. We have discussed every potential option. I also want to say I applaud Indianapolis Public Schools for bringing a creative solution to the public hearing that we had in June. I think that was a huge step forward in that discussion, and I applaud that. So this discussion today will be one where we are truly focused on doing what we believe to be the best thing for the students in that school community. And we believe that continuing to take school accountability seriously is the right thing to do for Indiana children and Indiana schools. I have two other issues that are of note. The first is the preliminary determinations for school and school corporation grades. Those will be released through the Learning Connection on Monday, September 10th. Now, there is a little delay in that, and I want to explain that. As most everyone here knows, this will be the first year where what we did with Public Law 221 also counts for what we do in No Child Left Behind. Okay, so this was the first year where those two accountability determinations are one. And the one thing I have charged our staff with is let's be sure we get it all right. Because frankly, the stakes are high. We acknowledge that the stakes of the school grades are very high. And we want to be certain that what we assign these schools is accurate. And we are in the process of double and triple checking those because, again, we are now in an environment where you don't have just AYP on one date and you don't have Public Law 221 on another date. These all mean the same thing. And so we are going through that data collection and data checking process. Once the grades are preliminarily released, and again, I want to emphasize that there will be a preliminary release. The appeals window will open for schools to appeal any aspect of the data. And then that appeals window will be open until September 21st. So from September 10th to September 21st, schools will have the opportunity to appeal that grade. And then the State Board of Education, we will bring those to you at the State Board of Education meeting on October 3rd for final approval. So that is our timeline. It's about a 2 to 3 week delay. And I apologize for that, but I only apologize because, frankly, I just think getting it right is the most important thing we can do. And I just want to be careful of that. The other issue is a discussion around the teacher licensing reforms. We initially planned to bring these to the board today. There has been, to date, we have received over 700 public comments. We have also received a great deal of input from the Select Commission meeting, I think 2 weeks ago, on this issue. And frankly, as this board has always done, we want to be deliberative. We want to take every piece of that public comment to heart. So I anticipate those could likely come to the board in December. But again, I have told our staff, because they won't affect this school year anyway, let's get it right. Let's take every public comment and let's drill into it and let's get it right. So again, those are two issues that I think are important to this board, where we are making some consideration really to one, let's be certain we get it right, and let's be certain we're accurate in the letter grades, and then let's make sure we take all the public comment, let's vet that comment, let's see where it fits into the concept of local control and flexibility for districts, and let's bring some determinations forward. So with that, I have no other comments. Board comments.
Tony, I want to publicly affirm and congratulate you on your leadership on this. This is uncomfortable. There's a lot of negotiations. It's not only the reduced size of the list we see of schools in trouble, but you start counting the lives. There's thousands and thousands of schools. We have their attention that we're going to be courageous. We'll have fussing, and we'll have grinding of teeth, gnashing of teeth, accusations sometimes even, and a lot of concern and consternation, but we're going to keep the bigger goal in mind: better lives for young people, better future for Indiana, and it won't always be easy to get there. And we've had the laws for a while. We haven't always had the courage and the vision. So I just have to publicly acknowledge we support it because we're the board, but day to day, and you're good staff. I've been impressed with their determination and willingness to listen and plow through this. And it's new ground, so it's hard ground. It's got some roots in it and rocks we had to get through and boulders to move. And imperfect as it is, we learned a lot. But you had to have courage. I really appreciate it. On the other two items, in my time of service on the board, I've probably received an awful lot of feedback on both those items, and I appreciate the cautious. I also thought the last couple of discussions, we talked about schools that maybe have made tremendous progress but didn't quite get the grade that they're going to be happy displaying. And we talked about some kind of commendation for that. Has that been given any more thought?
It's great question.
I mean, I want some kind of encouragement to the educators and community that are making progress, but have some ultimate score problems.
That's a great point, Dan. We obviously we are moving forward with the calculations that the board has approved. So I just want to be kind of fair and transparent about that discussion. There won't be any changes to the actual grade calculations. Now, what we have done is this, and this is a twofold discussion. One, the first piece of this is we are actually going to release the report cards almost in two different formats. The first format will be very graphic, that you've already seen, that allows people to really drill into the numbers if you like the graphs and if you like all the data, the plotting of data. The second one is a bullet point that's just kind of simple text for the, again, I think about my dad, the guy who would read the bullet points and say, this is what I want to know.
Very straightforward.
Very straightforward. And we're actually going to release that data in two different places so that schools and districts can see the actual data and how it affected the school letter grade. And they're also going to have just a very simple explanation that they could go to. So the way we've tried to accommodate that is by first giving the schools a tool with that with that comprehensive data illustration to show, hey, this is how we've done, this is how we've improved, see? And then that simpler one that says whether their improvement actually affected their letter grade or not. So that's kind of how we've done that. The second piece of that, Dan, is this. One of the things that I've made a comment many times, and I don't mean to be flippant about this, but I'd kind of like to hit the time machine button and go backwards. In 2001, when we rolled out 221, if I remember correctly, there was that little grid, that box that had the improvement. And I know there are some people here that are old enough and in schools at the time to remember. Well, the very next year, we changed that box and what was in that box. And having seated at the board table with Dr. Brooks, trying to explain that box wasn't easy. And then trying to explain it again a second time wasn't easy. But I think I learned a lesson, and I went back to say, are there tweaks to our calculations that maybe we should consider? And so I have charged our staff, and Wes is working with Dr. Beta Benner, who is actually the architect of the growth model, in terms of if we were to tweak, especially the elementary middle, and I want to be clear about this, I still am amazed that we don't hear anything about the high school model. I mean, I thought we would. I thought that would be the tough one, and it's been the one that everybody likes. So we are going back and really looking at that elementary middle model and saying, are there some tweaks we could make to that to make it even better? And I think that will happen, and we will likely bring that to the board in either late October or November.
So real practically, if I was a principal and had a group of faculty and community that made nice progress, maybe even outstanding progress in advancing a low-performing school, but the ultimate marks aren't enough to get me the grade we desire, whether it be A or B. The bullet points will balance that out, and it can be clearly in bold state. It's a remarkable growth, and the only reason you didn't get an A is you still have to get the ultimate score, so people can latch on to the momentum and not get in the funk of no matter what we do, we aren't going to get there. So,
Exactly.
So that's how that'll counterbalance.
Sure.
So that in a community, they can take the bullets and ride that horse further.
I think it would be interesting. I'm sorry, Mike. Can I just? I think it would be interesting, if possible, to have a report next time or sometime, to Dan's point, about some kind of list of schools that fit that category.
Sure.
It would be interesting to see, and perhaps even, for the board to take note of accomplishments that don't improve the grade, but still recognize significant improvement. I think we should be made aware of where
Is
that's
that-
happening.
Is that
I
like a
would
commendation list?
appreciate it. Something like that.
Something like that from the board?
If we go back to this, and I appreciate, Dan has probably brought this forward the most, and I think you said it again today, that I think there are a lot of kids out there that we cannot allow to be afforded to stay in school buildings that are passing at a 30% rate. That's not okay. And I appreciate that. But I still think that, and I've said this out loud before, I think Tony's legacy will be, we can take all this other stuff, but I think Tony's legacy will be that we have looked at the schools that have consistently struggled, and hopefully we've dealt with those. And I appreciate that. And Tony and I don't, we know that, and but not on everything, but that is what I probably admire most. Two other things, and I appreciate this comment. We worked really hard, and when I say we, I guess maybe I should say the board, the idea that, the AYP is not placing excellent schools in a C category, and we need to step forward to that, because last year we had that problem, where we had schools that were over 90% passing who were C's, and hopefully we've passed that. And so let's not forget that effort. The third thing I have, and I appreciate this, the whole concept on the REPA, and we were talking, I've probably had as much conversation on those as I've had on a lot of things on the board since I've been here. The two things I'm hearing the most are, and I agree with the comments, number one, we have to be real careful on how we're licensing special education teachers. And we also have to consider the ripples of allowing too many people to license teachers. I think down the road, I think there are going to be ripples to that. In coordination with that, I appreciate this, Tony. I agree that we've had less concerns about the high school grading model, because I think of what you've done is you've listened. So we've taken the Steve Bakers, who's sitting behind me, who has said, we don't like this, we're concerned about this, and you've been open to that. And I'd like to see the same type of situation as we pursue REPA, because I think there's a lot of similarities to that. And then Wes, the last thing I'll have is and I don't know if you're going to speak today, but the other thing that's come before me is if we can maybe address the security and integrity signatures that we're expecting from teachers, and I think that would be a good thing to bring before this board, with one question of being, I think what we're asking is simple. The question is, can we mandate signatures, et cetera? So.
We'll address that.
Thanks.
Anything else from the board? Tony?
I'd just like to take a moment and thank, I see Todd McIntyre in the back. Todd with Edison Learning and his staff, they have just done a remarkable job over the last 3 or 4 weeks in transforming Roosevelt High School. it almost is starting to have curb appeal again. I mean, it's a beautiful building, and they're just bringing it out, new steps, new facade. It is a noticeable transformation in a very short time to the facility as well as the grounds. It's been an improvement to the community. I really appreciate what you all have done and the quickness that you ramped it up. I didn't think you were going to be able to do it actually, Ty, but you know that. But it's been fantastic. And then also I think the Department of Education staff members, Jim Larson, Jackie Sissel, and Dale Shue, should be thanked. I think they moved sleeping bags into the school. They were up there for about 3 or 4 days, and we're doing things far beyond DOE activities, painting, cleaning, and just helping out. So thank you to the staff members as well.
Todd, can I won't give the unabridged version, but may I have to pass along a short story about Roosevelt that I think is really, it's amusing. I guess about a week ago Friday, a parent came into Roosevelt quite angry about the new structure of Roosevelt and what was expected of students in terms of behavior and order and what have you, and really gave the principal a very tough tongue lashing. I think we could classify it as a little vitriolic, couldn't we, Todd? The principal said, if you choose, you can take your children and go elsewhere. And the parent took up the principal, and the principal did say, I think you'll be back. And on Tuesday, that was on a Friday, on the following Tuesday, the parent came in and said, I'd like to know how much tail, and he didn't use the word tail, I have to kiss to get my children back in this school. So not only is it curb appeal and what people see from the outside, we are hearing in all the issues, we continue to hear that we're seeing differences. So I too thank all of our TSOs for that and our lead partners, because again, we always want to focus on the TSOs because in the news that's kind of the sexy discussion, but our lead partners at Broad Ripple and Washington have really performed very well. So I just want to say that once again, accountability is working in this state. So thank you, Tony, for saying that. Anything else? I don't think we have any public comment, do we? Okay. So now we're up to the discussion. Spotlight on learning. I am so sorry, Fran, because I'm supposed to do the introduction. Fran Thaley is here, and I say Fran is the former superintendent of New Harmony Schools. And I say former because Fran and the folks at North Posey took a very, and we use this term pretty loosely in our world, but I think in this situation it's very appropriate. Fran took a very courageous step in the last year in that she moved the New Harmony community to consider, and I don't know if the right word's consolidation, but maybe another word would be annexation of the New Harmony schools into North Posey. And she did that because as the superintendent of the district, she believed she was going to struggle in the future of providing the right educational opportunities for the children of New Harmony. And this was a situation that by the end of the school year last year, there was almost a celebration that we were making this move for our children. And so in the communications, because Fran has kept the department abreast of this, we actually were able to help her identify Dr. Phyllis Amick to begin this process, and Dr. Amick has done this in other places. And so since the first day of this discussion, Fran has kind of kept us informed of what's gone on. And as this very successful transition from 2 different school districts to 1 school district took place, I just thought it was a very good discussion for the board to hear. Because it was a discussion not of a hostile takeover, this was a discussion of 2 communities saying we're going to do what's best for the children and finding a way to make it happen. And so I asked Fran to come in today and share that discussion with the board, because I frankly think it's something, as we look throughout the state and making sure all of our children have equal educational opportunities, it's a pretty good lesson to learn. So Fran, I'll turn it over to you and let you present, and then I know the board will have some questions. Right up.
Sit right up here. Okay. All right. I do thank you for the opportunity to be here. And when Dr. Bennett asked me to do this, I thought I have a wonderful opportunity to talk to people in this room, and they in turn may be able to help people that face what we faced. Consolidation is a very scary thing, because you think about splitting communities, hurting kids. And I think I can say without reservations that we have successfully. And as Dr. Bennett said, it actually turned into a celebration of the history of the New Harmony School. We actually, and it was just a moment of inspiration, we decided to put together a celebration committee. And we put on the diehard Rappites on this committee, and they turned it into just a wonderful thing. And I can say without reservations that it was successful, because I've been in contact with folks that are actually working in the new consolidated corporation, and they say the kids are thrilled, the parents are thrilled. Everything just seems to fit. It's going very, very well. We did a lot to prepare our kids for that first day of school. We made sure they all visited their schools. We actually even sent teams of kids in to video in the schools before we ever made our decision. And the morning following the announcement that we were going to consolidate with North Posey, we brought our student body in and showed these films of the schools that their kids would be going to, these kids would be going to, and I've never seen kids so attentive. They sat on the edge of their seats because it was an exciting time for them too. So it has gone extremely well, but it is a scary process, and it is one of those things that could go wrong if you make the wrong decision. You've got to make good decisions all the way around, and I think we were very, very lucky. When we had to make a choice, it seemed like we always picked the right one. So, and I would like to answer questions today if I could, if you have some, or I can talk more about how we did it or the timeline, whatever you would like to hear. We did consolidation by annexation. There are a number of ways to consolidate, and that is basically the first thing you have to decide in the process. And that's tough because there are different ways, and each one fits a different timeline, and you've got to figure out that timeline to match what you can do in your community to get them ready to actually consolidate. And we took probably the fastest track that we possibly could, because we felt that we would lose kids if it went into a second year, because they're going to say, well, I've got to move anyway. I'm going to move the year before. We actually started with our consultant in August of 2011. We held town hall meetings in October, November. We made the decision in December to seek to consolidate. Now, that's not any great legally binding thing, but that said to the community, we're going to do this. And then in January, between the vote in December and January, we had put together volumes of materials on the two school corporations that we could have chosen. And we actually set criteria, we studied the information we had, and we made a decision. We announced that in January. And then we did all the legal things after that. And we had actually done a survey of our people in October, November, because we did not want to go to referendum. We wanted our folks to tell us what they wanted before January. And that turned out to work extremely well for us because there was no remonstrance, there was nothing. We got to those May dates and we knew we could move forward. So as of July 1, 2012, we had consolidated. So it has gone extremely well. Our kids are doing extremely well. Our community is doing extremely well.
How close are you guys?
We're 10 miles to the elementary school from the center of town. And that we would have gone either way. It would have been exactly the same.
Talk a little bit more about what prompted you to decide.
Okay. Probably the perfect storm. We had money in the bank. We had good test scores, but the restoration grant went away. The small schools grant went away. We were going to see a big cut in our finances. We were probably one of the most expensive per child to educate the child, and you do have some moral obligations there also. And we were losing kids. We're suffering what rural America is suffering. Of Posey County, we were losing the smallest percentage of kids, but we were the smallest. One kid in a large group is not noticed, one kid in a small group is noticed. So we got to the point where, like I said, we had great test scores, but we had one class that had 3 kids in it. And you lose the socialization that you should have in a classroom. At the high school level, we probably didn't have as many choices as we should have had. And we talked about even trying to move our high school kids and keep in the elementary, but we're losing in the elementary. So it was that perfect storm. We're just getting too small.
Thank you for your leadership.
It was scary.
The best example is, although we see many of people acting in behalf of the students, that's ultimately what you were doing. Would you give us your advice to the next school district that faces this?
Be very, very, very prepared. Because we went into the town hall meetings and they would say, "Why didn't you do this?" And we could say, just for example, "Why didn't you talk to USI about?" And we could say, "On this date and on this date and on this date, we met with this person, this person, this person." I would, definitely do that. Really do your homework. And then when you start the process, get the information out over and over and over. Probably a little story. I always stop and got coffee at a gas station. I walked in one morning and I could hear a couple of gentlemen talking about what was going on, and they had some of the information wrong. And I said, "I'm going to bring you a packet of information tomorrow, and if you could just leave it here on the table, I would appreciate it." And then I talked to the owner, and I left packets, and I watched them, and they became dog-eared, and these guys around the coffee table read them. And then I thought, well, this is a great idea. I did it at every establishment in town. And we put everything online. And every time there was a question, we put a question and an answer online. And then every time the media wanted to ask about this, I would give an answer, and I would say, "It's well written on our website." And they got it right. They got it off the website. Sometimes when they quote you, they take just a small part and then it's wrong. But they got it right. They did an excellent job for us. So I'd say those couple of things just right at the beginning.
Did one of the high schools just go away? All those students went to the other?
Actually,
Or did you start a new one?
when we started this process, we even talked to the two school corporations kind of informally before, and they basically said, we cannot keep a school in your community. They closed our building. We have no school in our community. And they were honest and upfront with us, and they couldn't financially keep that building. So we just in turn made that real clear to the public when we started. So.
Any other questions for Brent?
Just a comment, if I could, having been to Alumni Weekend at New Harmony several times, I know the pride that they had, and you're to be commended for making a tough decision. And anytime there's change, it's always received a little reluctantly, but just from the general public, you handled it as well as I think anyone could, and you should be commended for that. I know you don't always hear those things, but I think from my standpoint, it went as smoothly as anything like this could, and you made the right decision.
But we did hear those things. The last day of school, we had a celebration and we actually rang the bell for the last time, and it was tough.
Absolutely.
But people came up and thanked our board members. There was no bad feelings.
Good.
They actually, and probably the question of what you should do, the celebration committee turned out to be one of the smartest things we did. You know, they planned the last day. It wasn't administration, it wasn't school board, it wasn't, and they even had an alumni or a vintage night at a ball game where all these older guys tried to squeeze into their Letterman's jackets, and it was, and these people got to tell their stories. They got to talk about the days of New Harmony School. So that's another one that was a good thing.
Brent, thank you. David, you mentioned this about putting kids first. This was an example because I think sometimes to put it in this context, North Posey didn't pick Fran Thaley up as an assistant superintendent.
Well, I said right off front, I didn't want that because I didn't want that clouding the issue. Because sometimes you get into those issues and that doesn't help the process.
So this was a situation where someone put their own profession and said, we're going to do what's best for children if it means me not having a job. And what a strong statement that is. And I just thank you for your vision, your courage, your tenacity, your perseverance. And it is a great model. And again, when we think about the role of the state board, the role of the Department of Ed, it's to really take ideas like this and, so now Fran, we don't have Rolodex anymore, but, in our computer, Fran's name is here. And if another school district wants to know how to do it, we have someone to plug right in and say, here's a resource. You ought to talk to them. So, again, thank you very much for all you've done.
Thanks.
Thank you. Now discussion, right? We're going to have an update on school interventions. We're going to start with the TSOs. Is that correct, Jim? The lead partners. I'm sorry. And I had them as number 2 on my list.
We made that change yesterday.
Let's start briefly. Good morning, everyone, first of all. We'll start briefly, just a few comments about lead partners. That work is work we heard about quite a bit at the last meeting, so we won't say much about it today. We'll say that work has started. The year has been kicked off at the 2 schools. The work begins, and starting next month, the way that we'll update you going forward is through a monthly sort of progress monitoring form where you'll see the annual goals then benchmarked. We talked a lot about the need for data dashboards around this table, and so you'll see them monthly benchmarks so that can guide our conversations going forward. And so you'll start to see those with next month's meeting, the October meeting. And additionally, we'll be sure to send out schedules for professional learning community meetings. I know that Carrie has been to one, and many others around this table have expressed interest in going to those. So we'll be sure that information is shared with you so you can attend if you are interested in doing so. Today we will hear some brief updates from our turnaround school operators. This month's update again, will look slightly different than ones going forward. Similarly to the LEAP partners, we want to use a data dashboard to track our progress in our turnaround academies. And the only reason why this month's update looks different is because we've just begun. And so a lot of the data that we want to start looking at, benchmark data, acuity data, SRI data, et cetera, is being collected really right now in some cases, and some school students are testing it. Last week we were at Roosevelt, and we saw students taking SRI. So we'll have more data to look at starting in the October meeting, and we will do that. But there is some data to guide our discussion today around enrollment and around staffing. And you'll hear from representatives from each of the turnaround school operators providing us with that information and save time for questions and discussion. We'll go in the order of Edison Learning, Ed Power, and then lastly CSUSA. And I'll start with Tom McIntyre.
How are you? Good.
Thanks for being here, Tom.
Good morning. Todd McIntyre, Edison Learning. We've had a great opening at Roosevelt. We started school on the 15th of August. Just finished up the first 2 weeks of school yesterday and continuing onward. Thank you to the department staff who came up and helped support us getting ready for school to open in the days before that, and for being there during the opening. Thank you, Dr. Bennett, for being there for the ribbon cutting and giving such kind remarks and inspiring remarks. And thank you, Mr. Walker, for your comments as well this morning. Appreciate that. We're very happy with the way that things are going. Students and families, teachers, staff have certainly bought into the philosophy that we're trying to do at Roosevelt, which starts with embedding a set of core values into the school, and then building positive behavioral systems and academic expectations from those core values. The core values have been embedded very intensely in these first few days of school, and making certain that the new culture is established early on and expectations are very clear. And those values are being celebrated on a regular basis. Students can recite them. They can talk about what they mean. They can talk about courage and integrity and wisdom and hope. And they can cite examples of them in their classmates. It's inspiring to walk into a classroom and see them pointing to other people in their class and talking about how they are demonstrating those core values in their classroom and in their interactions with the students. So that is the foundation of what we do, is work with core values and then build our academic program up for that. And so I wanted to just mention that's been a big focus, and we're going to continue to work on that as we go forward. We were asked to provide an enrollment update. Just provided a snapshot from the first week and a half. We started with an enrollment on opening day of about 700, a little over 700, and that's continued to increase. We've had a lot of walk-ins over the course of the last 2 weeks. There's also a significant number of no-shows, and so we're, as with most schools, trying to work both ends of that, trying to figure out who's not coming for whatever reason and making sure that attendance is moving forward. We were also asked to provide the special education population numbers, and you can see that it is a significant population. We're working to review all of the IEPs at this point. Since we didn't have any responsibility for creating them, we want to feel comfortable that they're appropriate given the children's needs, and that we've got the right resources in place to meet them. And so that's an activity that we're working on very aggressively as well. I can tell you that this week the enrollment has actually gone up another 15 or 20 so far, as we continue to work through the rest of the cleanup as we're moving forward. So we're happy with where we are with that, and we need to keep tweaking up attendance. That's one of the areas where I think there's a cultural change that we're going to have to continue to go through with the school there. This is our staffing. We were asked to report about this as well. We are fully staffed at this point. We do have 2 or 3 classrooms, particularly in the high school math and science areas, that are currently filled by, we call them guest teachers or substitutes, long-term substitutes. They are doing a fine job of filling in as we continue to search for highly qualified people in those hard-to-fill areas. Some of them actually are certified in those areas. They just didn't necessarily meet the standard that we expected for a full-time permanent teacher, but they're being given this as an audition time as well as they fill those classrooms. You can see that we've invested a lot in the student support program. That includes a director of student support, a director of student engagement, and our counseling and special education staff. Because of the number of students with special needs and because of the history of the school, the cultural challenges, school culture challenges, we've decided to invest a lot in that area. We did win a grant earlier this year for an alternative education program that will be housed within the school as well. And as the needs arise to place students in the alternative program, we have the staff ready to do that, and we're getting the space ready to do that as well.
You're 21, that's a lot of people in your student support. Do any of them teach as well?
Yes, in fact, that includes all the special education teachers, which is more than half of that total. We have 3 counselors, 2 social workers, about 12 or 10 or 12 special education teachers are included in that mix. We have mostly an inclusion model. About 80 to 90% of our special education is done in the regular education classroom, where the special education teachers are co-teaching in the regular classroom.
You know, in our building, we'd take that down to 10 and move that classroom teacher to 40. I mean,
yeah, you could do it that way. It's
Yeah,
just a matter of how you count them, because they really are classroom teachers as well. Yeah. Okay.
I'm sorry, Safety 12.
That's our security staff, really. We have a full-time head of security. The dean is we've got him under school support, but the dean works with that team as well. And then there are 11 part-time security officers. They have sort of split shifts so that we make sure that we're covered well throughout the day. Roosevelt is over 425,000 square feet. It is a very difficult building to secure because of lots of blind corridors and hiding places. And I think, our goal would to not have to have as many security people, but that's what we need now, and we'll continue to evaluate that as we go forward. The building is safe. There have been, to my knowledge, no significant incidents of violence or any fights, anything like that in these first 3 weeks of school. Our understanding is that's a very different situation from the past, and we're very happy about that. So we feel good about the environment that's been set up, the learning environment that's been set up, and particularly around the security.
Granular, but I'm just intrigued. That's a lot of square foot for this number of folk.
It is.
Do you ever think about closing off sections and get this, save you operational money? And
yes, we have. We have done that. We're not using all 425,000 square feet. Yeah, there's 3.
You get lost. I haven't seen a person room. Anybody out there?
Yeah. Yeah. There's.
It's lonely.
There are 3 floors in the main classroom building. We're not using the 3rd floor at all. There's an old gym. There's a whole variety of spaces that we've been able to sort of cordon off. Partially, we're continuing to work on that. We're actually going to put up some barriers, I guess you'd say, partition walls that can be removed in the future if the need is the need there. Yeah, the alternative program is based upon the approach that we use, that Edison Learning uses in its Magic Johnson Bridgescape drop-back-in centers, which is a blended learning environment. Students have live teachers and the opportunity to take e-courses in about 160 different subject areas or specific courses that they can take. It's going to be actually housed in a building on the campus that's removed from the main building. There is the field house in the stadium has a wonderful classroom space on the 2nd floor, which the ROTC has used in the past, and my understanding used to be where all the school dances were held in the middle part of the 20th century, I guess. And it's got a fire. It's just a beautiful space. And so it'll be separate from the main facility. It's being outfitted now with technology and everything that we need in order to run the program.
Are you having trouble when you're not there yet? But maybe it's a general question now that I'm thinking of it. Are there issues of transferring blended learning courses for consideration of credits so colleges will accept them?
No, I think, Mike, you pretty well, like when you
your schools can transfer. Because again, let's kind of talk about that.
There's a list of clearinghouse courses that
Yeah.
would be accepted.
Okay.
So you can go to that list. So.
And we vet all of our courses against those kind of. So that's staffing. Just a few successes. We've mentioned some of these in the introduction. We're very pleased with the buy-in that we've received from the parents and the staff and the students to the program. It's a new way of working. Every staff member has a group of 15 students that they meet with on a regular basis. It's called Our Meeting. And they're called the Learning Coach. They focus very much on getting to know those students personally and to identify what their learning needs are and to guide them throughout the year, throughout the course of their time at the school, in tracking what their learning is, where they're making progress, and if there are any barriers, what they can do to help them get there. It's one of the ways that we're trying to tackle the attendance challenge that we're working through right now, is through that Our Meeting system. We're getting very positive feedback from parents. Most of this is anecdotal at this point, but we'll be collecting more formal data in the weeks and months to come. But standing on the bus line when students are arriving or departing and parents are picking children up or dropping them off, there are lots of smiles and thumbs up and say, keep doing what you're doing. This is a place to be. We're really pleased with the change in attitude that we're experiencing. And as we said, we're really focusing on core values. Lots of successes, and we feel very, very, very good about how that's going. We've got a few challenges that we're continuing to deal with. We did a focus groups last week with all the staff of the school in small groups to get a sense of what their celebrations were and what their concerns were. These are some of the things that they've mentioned and things that we would typically have to work through at this stage of a startup project like this. Consistency is always a challenge. We think that we're in the probably 80 to 85% consistency range right now, but there are a few members of the staff that need to ratchet up their level of consistency with implementing the expectations or honoring or celebrating the values that we're establishing. As we do that, we think that the culture will only improve further. We had a number of late hires that came in the last 2 weeks or so, or last week before school started. As we've enrollment, which we're happy with now, took a long time to get up there. And so we staged our hiring. We hired up to what we would need to serve 500 students first, and then once we exceeded that, we filled out the rest of the staff. But some of those staff members didn't get our full 5-week training program, and so we're having to go back and do some backup training now, and just finding time to do that is a challenge. It's going reasonably well. Some of the materials are available online, so they're able to do some of this asynchronously, but we're working hard to make sure that all of the staff is trained at the same level that we expect. Technology's been a little bit of a challenge. There's a lot of infrastructure in the building, wiring infrastructure, which is great, but it's taken a long time for us to kind of get it fully turned over from the systems that were in place under the school corporation, just because of the nature of the way it's set up. Every classroom has its own switch, and that required a tremendous amount of reprogramming and getting everything to work together. It's coming together. We have, I think as Jim Larson mentioned, we've got computer labs working now. We're doing SRI testing. Teachers are having access to those. So it's coming along. We just feel like we have a long way to go in terms of getting to where we want to be with our full technology implementation. So we can do more blended learning. We can have more devices, computing devices for students to use, iPads, et cetera, as well as classroom labs and those sorts of things, interactive whiteboards. It's all coming. It's just taken a little longer than we would have liked for the start of school. I've talked to you all before about facilities and some of the other challenges that we have with the Gary School Corporation. I'd say that those things really haven't changed substantially. We still don't have a working elevator. We have children that are wheelchair bound, 2 of them, who are not able to fully participate in the program. We have filed a complaint with the Office of Civil Rights, Federal Office of Civil Rights on this. But we've had no progress on it, and it's a shame, and it's a serious concern for us both that we're not able to fully meet the needs that these children have. We also have a very warm building. There is almost no HVAC working in the building, and we haven't been able to make progress with the school corporation in addressing those issues. And unfortunately, there are also a number of unventilated places with no windows that we're having to use, even though we'd like to not be able to use them. There's some that we have to use. So we're continuing to work on those things. We have discussions with the school corporation on a regular basis about these, but we just don't see progress made towards resolving them.
If I may just jump in here a minute, just sharing with Tony, Jim and Dale and Jackie and I actually, on the first day, actually visited other Gary community schools, and I would suggest that the same struggles are occurring in the other Gary community schools. I want to be fair and say that I don't think this is a situation where Gary is intentionally neglecting Roosevelt as much as it's evident that they are also struggling with the upkeep of all of their buildings.
Is there anything that can be done? Is there any special grants that can be applied for, or are there any donations from the community that could be sought to try to fix some of these?
Matt, do you want to, or Jim, you want to come forward and talk a little bit about that? I know there was some findings that I think have occurred since our last board meeting in the courts about actually the facilities issue that I think is important to share with the board. Would you mind doing that?
Sure. I'm sorry, Tony, you talking about an update on the list as litigation?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think Neil, besides that, also has a question about what else is available. I want to set that as the kind of the foundation for what else is available.
The court did issue an order probably 2 weeks ago. One of the findings that the court made was that due to some of the budget constraints in Gary, some of the facilities issues, specifically at Roosevelt, is more of a function of those budget issues rather than Gary intentionally neglecting Roosevelt. So that's what the court order says. I've talked and frankly worked with both Tom Jackson and Todd McIntyre on that issue, and we're trying to be as creative as possible to try to resolve some of these issues so kids can access the building, the elevator issue can be fixed. We're trying to work through the HVAC problem. Jim Larson may be the best person to talk about funding, whether there are additional funding pieces that may be able to help with the building maintenance and repair.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at all kinds of, as Todd and I talked about in our last visit, we're looking at all kinds of outlets. We're fortunate to have a member of our staff who's active in, historical preservation in the state, thinking about, it's a building with a lot of history, thinking about ways in which you can reach out to those civic organizations, leveraging, some of those funds. The challenge is trying to find things that are permissible for different grant opportunities to be able to address some of these immediate needs that Todd has outlined here around HVAC, around really around the elevator, and ensuring that all students have equal access to the educational program.
District trying to resolve these issues, or are you out on your own trying to resolve these issues?
Well, I'm working with Tracy Coleman, who's the attorney for the district. So we are in contact and trading emails and phone calls. So we're actively trying to work through these issues, both with the district and with Edison.
Let me say, I have had ongoing discussions with the new superintendent, Dr. Pruitt. First of all, there is a willingness on her part to address these things. And the minute she mentions a willingness to address them, she has to immediately say, I can't take care of these issues in our own buildings right now. Again, when we visited Gary West, it was equally hot that day in Gary West. And there Dr. Pruitt shared a number of facilities issues throughout her district with me. So again, I think we do have a direct channel, and I do hear a willingness from their administration to help, but I hear a very clear signal that they don't think they will be able to help, which is going to create the need for us to find alternative means, as Neil's mentioning.
Well, I think Tony's made the point before that there are probably too many schools in Gary, and I hope we're encouraging them, especially with a new superintendent, to think about that. At the same time, I also do hope that we're trying to be creative. I mean, you make a very good point and a very important point. This is not an intentional effort. It's tough up there, and the budget problems, I'm sure, are very real. So accepting that, we're just kind of trying to look for solutions, and I just hope we're being creative and thinking about foundations. I know there are a few, U.S. Steel is up there, or the big BP has a big facility up there. Maybe we could figure out a way to ask for some help in light of the experiment we're trying to create here and the turnaround we're trying to effect. Maybe we can get some support behind that.
I think that's a good point, Neil, and really part of the issue is going to be who does the asking. I think there are some issues historically, but I think, Todd, Neil's point that maybe your Friends of Ted organization, the way it's currently composed, may be a very effective private donation solicitation.
And they have started to do some fundraising efforts. In fact, they got their first hit this week. I don't recall exactly who it is. I don't think it's finalized. I shouldn't say, but there is that's on the agenda, and putting some of these things to the forefront is a key there.
We won't solve this today, but there's a root cause problem here. It's either, I think if I remember right, the expenditure per child in that district's high. So how did we get here? What choices have been made? What management problems do we have? Because Friends of Ted and all ought to go fix this, but it doesn't deal with the root cause. If every building isn't functioning well, somebody didn't budget right, and they didn't hold people accountable, and they didn't allocate right. And now we have a bunch of children stuck in schools where there's no ventilation, and they're supposed to learn, get their scores up. So, I mean, my recall, it had been a while, when I looked at the highest district expenditures, I mean, what's the root cause? How do we get to that? Because it's kind of hard to go in each case then and fix it until we get to the...
I can answer that one word, Dan. Depopulation. There's too much excess capacity in the school corporation. That's been slow.
So we've been slow in making decisions about number of people, number
scaling
of
down.
Yeah.
Yeah, the last thing I would just say is that we've had ongoing discussions with the school corporation about transportation. We have dialogue and are working through the challenges there. School corporation has its own set of issues. I think they've reduced their number of buses this year by about 40% and are enforcing a walk zone that they had not enforced in the past. So there is a sort of cultural change that the community is having to go through with the new transportation regime. So that's a challenge. Of course, being dependent upon the school corporation to provide that service is not the place we would like to be. We've spoken with the department about this, and we would just reiterate that that's a legislative change we would very much like to see happen in this next session, is to allow turnaround operators to offer their own transportation service. That's really the only service that's carved out and held for the school corporations, and we feel like we could provide a better, more integrated service to our families if we were able to contract that as we do food service and security and custodial and the other services for the school. Well, maintenance of the building, we contract for the cleaning of the building. Maintenance of the building.
I'm talking elevators.
Well, the trick there, of course, is the dollars. I mean, those are local tax dollars that fund that. If those could follow the building or follow the child, we would take that on, certainly. But the question would be how do those dollars get distributed?
We could figure that out. Do you think your elevator would be working now?
Yes. No, that's it.
Any other questions for Todd?
With one or two exceptions, these are normal implementation issues or having to adjust the environment as you find it.
Yes.
As you look down the road, do you see any boulders that haven't hit that list yet that you anticipate?
We don't think so. I think there is always a question about a level playing field for competing for students or giving parents school choice. We've had some challenges with that, particularly with the special ed population. You saw on one slide that there was some attempted transfers of students. We think that's something that we'll have to monitor as usual, because obviously in a school choice environment there needs to be a free choice. And as Roosevelt as a school, which is not a charter school, but is a public school, but not part of the school corporation, it's sort of in a unique place. And so I think making sure that everyone understands the expectations around that is something that we'll have to continue to work on. But I think we've identified what the big challenges are.
One other question. Your blended learning, is it predominant in your building, or just that alternative work?
No, we're implementing it in the school as well. In fact, we're just kind of getting our toes wet right now, but we already have some blended learning happening in some of the upper level social studies classes. The U.S. government class is doing that now, and our plan is, according to the turnaround plan, is by year 2 that every student is having some blended learning opportunities.
Just a big bolder future piece is the 50% seat time as we grow into this arena. Just, it's a legislative issue.
Are you seeing participation in extracurriculars and athletics?
It's going well. When Terrence Little, the principal, told me that we were going to have a football game 2 days after school started, I thought I thought he was crazy, but we did it. We fielded a team, about 25 players. They held their own for about 3 quarters and had a tough time in the second quarter, but they did all right. It had another tough game this Friday, but we're doing well. There's also volleyball happening for the girls. Cross country is going along as well, and I believe that they just finished the cheerleading tryouts last week as well. So trying to make sure that there's a good variety of extracurricular activities. The more academic or club type activities will get started, as the staff gets settled in a little bit. Okay, thank you.
Good morning. Okay, it has arrows on it. Good. I thought I was going to get lost. It's our pleasure to update you about our work at Arlington High School. Certainly invite you by for a visit when you have an opportunity. We'd love to not just get you in the space to see what's going on, but really to get your feedback about how things are going and ways in which we might push the program to better serve the students. Our enrollment is sitting at 593, 136. We say plus of those are special education students, just because we continue to sort through the caseload. We're really trying to work very deliberately. We have a very large team working with special education students, given a lot of confusion and tumult in the special ed population in terms of the information that those families were getting, and trying to get that clarified. And so we continue to work on those numbers.
You got 593 students, and of the 593,
Yes, sir.
36 are special
That's right.
education, not 593
Plus, exactly.
136, is that part of that?
Right.
Okay.
We are currently fully staffed across the building. We've been working very deliberately to set a particular kind of culture in the space. I think that's paying off big dividends. I think the kids are properly oriented. We staggered them back into school. We'll stagger them out at the end of school, but it gave us an opportunity to get all the kids properly oriented for the kind of learning environment that we want to see within the school. It takes a tremendous force to get that done. We're not at 425,000 square feet. We're at 380,000 square feet. We did consider trying to lock down certain portions of the building, but given the way the architecture lays out, it's just not viable. For instance, all of the art facilities are on the first floor with the band and music facilities. The science facilities kind of sit in the middle. It's just really hard to really seclude spaces within the space. So we're still all over that 380,000 square feet. We think we've cut off some routes that were traditionally used for truancy purposes by our students last year as we were observing. But it takes not just a security force, and I do believe Arlington is now one of the safest places on the planet, thanks to retired Deputy Chief Bill Benjamin and the kind of systems he and former Hamilton County Sheriff Doug Carter have brought to the table to make sure that the school is secure. But we also have a continuum of hall monitors whose job is not to secure the space, but really be an extra set of eyes in the corridors to make sure we don't have kids floating. That, I think, has paid big dividends for our kids. Sure. Yes.
The difference between hall monitors and safety. What's the
difference between hall monitors and safety? Are they listed separately?
They are. There's 3 hall monitors shown as assist with security and 14.
Yeah, I think that's a typo. Those hall monitors should be rolled in with the safety. That shouldn't show separately.
It's fine if they do.
No, that should be part of that overall safety number. We've got a director of security and Chief Benjamin. We've got 3 full-time officers, and then we've got about 5 part-time officers, and then the hall monitors on top of that. I said to you 3 or 4 months ago, I felt like Arlington was one of the most persistently dangerous places I had been. And I think that's true. I think if I brought the kids in who attend Arlington now, who used to attend Arlington, they would echo that sentiment. As a matter of fact, the feedback I've been given by the kids is maybe Arlington's a little too safe. Our students are not quite sure why they need real cops, and I had to explain to them that IPS police are fully sworn police officers. You already had real cops. They are, but there's something different about your cops. I don't know. I don't know what's going on. I can't really explain the difference, but I will say that I think it's a much safer place, and I think that adds to why you're going to see some tremendous growth on the part of kids. If you can't get to safety, you can't get to learning. I believe we'll be down to learning really quickly as a consequence. We spend a lot of time in training of both teachers and teacher leaders. And so the kids came back in staggers starting on the 13th of August, but the staff has been back since July 1. We invest a great deal of time in trying to make people relevant for the kids, given the context. And so we take them through not just our curriculum strategies, but also our pedagogical strategies, our management strategies. The leadership of the school had to come up with a full choreography of the school day to be able to open the school, right? And so we invest a lot of time, and I think that's paying dividends in making sure that the staff was prepared to encounter the kids. We have a very strong emphasis on our culture. And so when you enter Arlington, you'll hear the staff talking to the Knights about the Knight culture and what that means for those students. We've given baseline acuity assessments to determine where the kids are. We're encouraged that the kids are going to make a whole lot of growth. We think we've got a great foundation to help them grow, and so we'll be able to share that information with you at your next meeting. And the feedback we get from parents of our students who have previously patronized the school, as well as the students, is they don't always understand the change, but they like the change. And so we're happy about that. Opportunities for improvement. Certainly, if you give folks a month and a half to get ready, if you bring somebody in tomorrow, they're just not at the same level of capacity. And so try to fight through what the professional development challenges are for teachers who have to join us late as enrollment increases. Transportation, I think, caught us a little by surprise, mostly because there were expected hiccups in terms of stop times, perhaps address changes. We didn't anticipate that kids who were transported to the school last year would, for whatever reason, not be transported this year. And so students who have not moved, who received transportation to Arlington last year, were told for various reasons they could not be transported back to Arlington. For instance, a child who was transported from, we think, 1.7 miles away, was told he only lives 1.49 miles away, which is just a tenth of a mile under the 1.5 miles he needs to be in order to not be a walker. And so he could not receive transportation back to his boundary school because he is not far enough away. However, that student and several other students were offered the opportunity to be transported to other IPS schools, John Marshall and Northwest, because they do live far enough away from those schools to receive transportation. These are the kids that we know about. There are probably a number of kids that we don't know about. And so if I can echo Edison's sentiment, I think we have to fully contemplate that in the process of this reform, all the information is not circulated quite the way that it needs to be circulated. And frankly, we don't have the wherewithal to interrupt those situations when they happen. These are direct parent to transportation office conversations that we are not party to unless a parent brings it to us, right? So we would say if we want to continue going down this road, we probably need to change that. I don't still understand the difficulty with the kids with special needs. We had a student who was assigned to Arlington. A parent came to a case conference to find out that that child had been transported to John Marshall for several days. We have a number of special education students who haven't been picked up. Mr. Hawkins is in collaboration with Gene Moore, the Director of Transportation, who, after a meeting with Dr. Suggs, the Chief of Staff, is alerted to the situation. They promise that this is going to improve. We've worked with Gene before. We believe him, that he's sincere, but this is a real issue for kids and for their families, frankly, who already fear that their special needs kids are not going to be served well. And then when these hiccups outside of the turnaround operator's control happen, then for them it just kind of solidifies these fears that they've had. Equipment, certainly an issue. Just along that stream with special education, has been a struggle. We were told that for the students remaining in the school, all special ed equipment would be left for those students based on their IEPs. We've struggled to get some Mac computers back in the building for kids, specified in their IEPs, not anything that we've added, things that were already due to those students. And I know Ms. Douglas, our Director of Special Education, has been trying to work back and forth, not just with Mr. Warner at IPS, but also Nicole Norvell here at the Department of Education to resecure those issues for those students. Just for the gen ed environment, there's no cardio equipment in the building for the kids. Our inventory in January counted, Mr. Hawkins, what, 9, 10 pieces of cardio equipment. We understand that there's some struggle around how that was paid for. I don't really care about that. I just think the kids in the building are entitled to some cardio equipment because it's their school and they chose to stay in it. And so things like that, I think, continue to be an issue. And we either have to say there is a pool of money to replace things that are removed for the building for the kids in these turnaround academies, or, we're going to fight to get those things back for those kids in those schools. I just don't think it's anything we ought to deliberate about for a long time. We just need to pick and choose how we're going to happen. School-wide consistency is a problem that I own. When you are trying to maintain a certain kind of culture, it is an arduous task. When you sweat the small stuff, it hurts. And I have a staff that's very fired up, but we are working with that staff, and our professional development for the last 2 weeks, because we do that on a weekly basis, has been around this whole question of how we are warm demanding, how we insist upon what we want from our kids while at the same time being encouraging and nurturing. This week we're going to talk about the consistency of the culture and maintaining it not just for the next month, but really for the next 10 months. And so that's something that we're going to work on internally, because I do think people get fatigued. You do get past the honeymoon, and it becomes very hard to, on a daily basis, say, pull your pants up, you must have your materials for class, you must be in dress code, you must follow directions the first time, etc. But we are working through those issues. that's all I have, and I'm happy to entertain any questions that you might have.
I'll ask the same question. Sports and extracurriculars, are you finding interest and is there participation? You're happy with how that's going?
Sure. We have a volleyball team assembled. We're about to have cheerleading tryouts. Varsity football is up and running. Howe gave us a nice beating last week. However, I will say at that Arlington Howe game, we saw incredible sportsmanship on behalf of the students from Howe. The game went off without any major incidents, so we're excited about that. This week, the Ed Power Bowl is happening. Arlington at home versus the Charles A. Tinley Accelerated School. I will not be in attendance, so as not to look biased one way or another.
You can't lose.
Well, if just have to sit in the end zone until the game is over. And so there's access to extracurriculars. The high school kids have just gotten back. We've been really dealing in orientation, so we have a number of clubs that will be starting up in the next few weeks, sponsored by teachers and staff.
Mark, thank you for the update.
My pleasure.
Events report. Thank you. Do I wait for him to come back? Keep going.
Julie, you can go ahead.
Go ahead, okay. Wasn't anything I said. Thank you for having us here. Happy to bring some updates on our numbers here. We'll break it down by school, make it a little bit easier. Emmett-Donnan, as you can see, we have had a 7% increase in enrollment since the beginning of the month. Still working on that, as you will see in some of our challenges. Emmerich Manual, we have had a 17.7% increase, which is pretty big. I think that's substantial due to a lot of hard work on their part. And then at Howe, although we continue to get new students daily, we are losing some, and some due to withdrawals and no-shows, and some of our data that we're cleaning up. So it looks like we have a 2% decrease at Howe. Emmett-Donnan, our special ed, as you can see, we have a total of 79, and our English language learners 28. Our total enrollment right now there is 356. Emmerich Manual, our total 485, special ed students right now at 77, and our English language learners at 30. And then Howe 737, 110 special ed, and 30 English language learners.
Can you give me a quick, how many students we had last year again? How many students were at those schools last year?
You know, I don't have the exact
Okay,
number off the top of my head. I will get that to you, though. I don't want to just guess.
Okay, I appreciate that.
A few more than what we're showing here.
Really? The enrollment's
I do believe so.
The enrollment's higher than it was when it was?
No, last year higher.
Last year
Yeah.
higher.
Right now, staffing, and I apologize to Jim. He asked us to change the way we did our staffing, and we did not get that done for you yesterday, but I will get that for you. But I think it's also important to show, and I think that's why we wanted to do it this way initially, was to show you, we are staffed except for some positions at the schools. At Emmett-Donnan, we have a reading specialist and one media clerk. As you can see, that's, none of our core classes. They are all fully staffed in the core areas. At Emmerich Manual, we have the social studies, science, and PE positions, although they're showing open. It's not so much that we don't have people in those classes right now. It's just those classes are big classes, and we want to make those classes smaller, so we're looking at adding those positions. It's just a matter of looking at budget and the master schedule to see what we need to do with that. At Howe, we now, as of yesterday, have 2 special ed positions open. We just made an offer yesterday for someone Again, the English and science are mostly due to large class sizes. We also hired a media specialist who will work both as a media specialist and get our textbooks organized, our bookstore. I guess she was there last year and did a great job of that. We also need to add with hires. We just hired a coordinator of special education, which I think will go a long way to helping us address some of our special education needs. And I know Mark has mentioned the help from Ann and Nicole, and they have been very helpful with all three of our schools as far as organizing a plan for us for deliverables that we report to them every Friday with an update on where we are with our special education plan. And I know that has helped, and I think having our coordinator on board right now will also help us make sure that we are doing what we need to do for our special needs students. Yes, sir.
356 at Emma Donnan, does that include the 79 special ed and the 28?
Yes, those are, yeah.
So can you give us some sense as to how your total staffing breaks out against your total student numbers?
As far as numbers in classes, I can get that for you. I don't have that off the top of my head.
No, I just mean, do you have 100 staff members at Emma Donnan or 12 staff members at Emma Donnan total?
I don't know the total staff numbers for those, but I can get those for you. At Emma Donnan, our successes, we do believe that at Emma Donnan they have done a fantastic job creating that safe and orderly environment for the students so far, and they were real proud of the 0 fights to date at the school. We've had a 7% increase in enrollment since day one, as you saw. Emmerich Manual's success, their enrollment, they're very proud of that. And then at TC Howe, we just started our ambassador program where we've chosen students from each grade level to be leaders in the school, both in the classrooms and outside the classroom at events. We are doing our Quest visits right now, and I know you've heard us talk about those before. It's where we have a team of other educators from some of our other schools come in and they go into the classrooms and they do observations on the teachers, not as an evaluative process, but as just helping them become better teachers and see what's going on, give them feedback. And our students did a great job. They were there at 7 in the morning to greet the team as they came in, shaking their hands, looking them in the eyes, and welcoming them to the school. So we're really proud of that. And we will be doing that from grades 8 through 12. Some of our challenges and rooms for improvement, we know that we want to increase enrollment, especially Emma Donnan. That is one of their goals that they have set out for themselves. Supporting the socio-emotional needs of students. We have a lot of students who have emotional needs, family needs, and we are trying to come up with programs and services to help those students. Emmerich Manual, they are working on developing an incentive program. Right now they have about 25% of the students who on a daily basis are absent. That's far too high. And so they're trying to come up with some programs to improve that. And of course, as we all know, TC Howe, we are working on implementing policies and procedures to establish our safe environment. And I know there's been a lot of talk and discussion and press on that. And we are very aware of the issues that we have there, and I can assure you that everyone at TC Howe is working very hard right now to make sure that we get those policies and procedures in place and make that a safe environment, not just for staff, but students in the community coming into and around our building as well.
Do we have data about absenteeism, fights, other markers of expulsions, dismissal from classes
We are,
last year to this? Do you have last year's data?
I don't know if we would have last year's data.
So you'll just benchmark this year and try to continuous improve?
Right, and I would imagine that'll be part of what we present in the future to you as well, and we are.
Exactly. Starting next month, the data.
So that'll be on the data?
That's right. Expand that to include all those things starting next month.
Yes, and we are starting to collect that data.
Along with the learning, but in the safe and orderly environment.
Absolutely.
You're creating the metrics, so you don't have that data.
Right, yep. Yes,
you
we
have
are.
probably parents and student comments, but that isn't data.
Right, yep. So we will have all that data for you. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the issues that you have at Howe and that you guys are aware of that. And we also have, and I want to be very fair about this, we have two schools where I think we feel like when we hear what's going on in Roosevelt, we hear what's going on at Arlington, we see Emma Donnan, we hear what's going on at Emma Donnan and Manual, we hear that 4 of those schools are performing at a level where I think all of us are feeling like we got our hands wrapped around them. And I hear you say you have a little concern around Howe.
Mm-hmm.
What would you attribute the difference, because you are the operator who has 3 schools, what would you consider to be the difference that why Howe is not where Emma Donnan and Manual are, frankly?
I would say one of our biggest issues right now is the fact that and we are collecting this data as well, and we'll be happy to share it as soon as we have accurate numbers, but we know that we have a lot of students at Howe that were either in an alternative setting, had been through an alternative setting. We really and truly believe that part of that is a different demographic. So I think it's the students that are at Howe, it's a larger population than the other 2 schools.
They weren't at Howe last year?
Some I don't think were, no. Some came from the alternative setting to us.
So let me push a little bit more on that. We also know that you've had, like you mentioned, policies and procedures, which are not student-centric.
Right.
You know, in Marcus's words, those are the kind of the things that you own.
Yep.
What steps are you taking to get those up?
We are, great steps. We are meeting on a regular basis with our discipline team and developing stronger policies and procedures to address discipline as it happens. We have implemented ISS. We have started our detention, our Saturday school, to help instill some of that discipline. I really believe that at first we weren't as aggressive as probably we should have been in the first place, doling out some of the suspensions, because that's not something really we wanted to do, and we know that it's something we have to do. So the staff is becoming more comfortable with saying, okay, we need to start that progressive discipline, and we are working very hard to do that. We also just got approved for a second SRO at Howe, which I think will also help. We've been running Officer Harris absolutely crazy on a day-to-day basis, just having one officer there, and have asked for increased campus monitors.
What's the total number of security officers at Howe?
At Howe, we have 1 police officer and 3 campus monitors. We have a behavior specialist, and we have 1 guidance counselor, and are getting ready to hire possibly 2 more. So we have asked for additional assistance there.
So I think when the next time we meet, understanding what you just said about how, I know we're going to have a dashboard, but I would also like to hear the progress specifically on these areas as they pertain to how.
Yeah,
I guess I'd next time like to understand policies and procedures. You're right, but implementation requires staffing. Mm-hmm. And I'd be curious about the interplay between that as you roll out new changes, whether you feel like you need to up your staffing component. The environments may not be the same, but if other schools in Gary and East Side had 11 or 14 and you've got 1, I'm not sure that's a fair. You may be putting yourself in a position where
Right.
you're not able to exert the control you need to exert.
Right. And we know we need more staffing in that area and have asked for it.
I just have an overall comment, not targeted to you, but one of my personal concerns that I'm seeing as we get these reports is the scatter of students who have left the turnaround schools and the impact that will have on the other schools they went to. There seems to be a lot of tug of war going on in terms of the enrollment that I'm feeling, and it's not healthy. Mm-hmm. And it concerns me as it relates to the undermining on one side or the other in terms of the impact on the kids. Do we have any way, or are we watching those consequences? Or it sounds like it would be next to impossible, except for we do have an STN system, but I don't know.
Joe, I think this hits directly to the issue where I think we have some lessons learned as a department. And the lessons learned are, what does the transition year look like? Because, in this instance, I think we relied on the TSOs to operate directly with the school district. And I'm not sure that was the right arrangement. I'm not, I think we need to examine what the transition year looks like, because, frankly, I think we have to ask ourselves, how do we get the most out of that transition year? And I think this is an issue around that. What role does the state board, what role does the department have in the transition year, as opposed to just transferring all of the responsibility to the TSO working directly with the district? And I think, I've had very frank conversations with Gene. He said, the lead partner arrangement appeared to be more collaborative between the district and the department. This is a much more adversarial relationship, and I think that adversarial relationship, and I know Todd felt it in Gary, led to potentially, because you had two entities, one of which had never been here before and is doing brand new work in this state, working with the district, it led to some relationship problems. And the question I have about the transition year is, how does the department, how does the state board insert itself in the transition year to maximize that and minimize the problems between the district and the TSO?
I would agree 100% on that.
It's frightening to consider where those kids are going, and the tug of war they've been in the midst of, not just with the turnarounds and the existing schools, but the perception of, I'm not going back to that school, and who feeds that? The media, the whole tidal turnaround. You almost want to say, hey, this didn't work, so now we're going to try something. There's the definition's been harmful.
Sure.
I think we all agree.
I think we're at it. I think we're at a beginning. I don't think we were. If we didn't anticipate some of this turmoil, we were naive. Just understanding that we have to get through some of this.
Right.
So put your boots on and let's go.
That's why I was asking it for tracking,
Yeah,
or the
sure.
scatter wit.
Sure. We are.
And I do have to give IPS credit. I mean, there are some people there that have been very helpful with us in getting information and working with us to do what we need to do. Perfect example was the bus.
I wasn't pointing fingers. I was saying overall.
Yeah, but they worked
all
out
three
great.
presentations.
Yeah, they had people there helping us after school. You were there, and it is, I think, to a point where we need to start working together to help make sure that everything happens the way it should happen for the kids.
Thank you.
Well, the only other comment I'd make, Tony, is I wonder if it's more than just learning about this transition year. I would argue that the department needs more tools, and so I hope that as we think about a legislative agenda for the upcoming session, that we take into account those learnings and we develop a plan that gives the department more tools to act during a transition year, or in the case of district intransigence or non-cooperation. There's one thing when that lack of cooperation is potentially because of lack of resources, although, as we discussed earlier, that also is something that ultimately has to be resolved. But it's also there need to be remedies when there's evidence of the kind of deliberate lack of cooperation or adversarialness that is not in the interests of the children. And I think Joe makes a good point. It's the children and the families that have been caught in between this and have not been fairly, in my understanding and my appreciation from earlier meetings and from the way this is resolved, is that they were not really given full access to choice, full access to information about the choices available to them. It's discouraging to hear Marcus talk about, even individual students who are being gamed by the district. And so I certainly would hope that we'll think about proposals that give you more authority to intervene on behalf of children when that's necessary.
That is part of our discussion. That is actually a big discussion going on. I guess I would like to ask Jim, and I know Julie's the only one, well, Todd's still here, but Marcus left. You know, we've gotten what they each TSO sees as areas of improvement, and I know especially around the issue of how I want to see this, but I would like to see all three TSOs. What are their goals, their deadline, their timelines, and their metrics for addressing the areas that they own? You know, I understand that in, you know, the elevator at Roosevelt, that's a tough one to ask you how you're going to fix that. I mean, but the areas that each of them own, I want to know what their goals, what their timelines, and what measurements we should be looking at for the resolution of those issues.
Absolutely. So not only will we do a data dashboard update every month on things ranging from attendance to discipline to academic indicators, we'll also continue this pattern of areas of success driven by data going forward. Today was very anecdotal because of the newness of it, but going forward it's all going to be data driven, and then areas for improvement. And what the intent is to be sure that as we go forward with these updates, we should never see issues that we saw on August 30th in our areas of improvement subsisting into the October update. And if they do, that gives us, we should give us pause, to say the least, to have very serious conversations around why these things are persisting. Now, in the case of, to Tony's point, in the case of a place like Howe, where we have identified as a department through sending people in on a daily basis that there are, serious issues that we are looking at closely with Sue was saying, talking about. We're literally meeting on a weekly basis to troubleshoot these and break them into categories and unpack them and set timelines and deliverables. In the case of the other 4 schools where things, there are certainly areas for improvement, but where things are off to a good start, that is not as high touch of an update. That is more of we're continuing to go in, staff are there at the Indianapolis schools on a daily basis, representatives are at Roosevelt on a weekly basis to monitor that. If we need to escalate, if we need to check in more, we'll do that, which is why we're still very high touch in these buildings so frequently. And so it really breaks into on an as-need basis. If things are moving along, we're continuing to go in and report and document and monitor. If things are in a situation where we have serious concerns, that's where we're instituting much more frequent high-touch action plans, deliverables, backwards mapping for where we want to go, as we're doing currently in the case of Howe. And really what we're looking for there are solutions that were within the operator's locus of control. We're looking at, we want to find ways to serve students despite their exceptional needs. We want to find ways to build systems, be it in special education, be it in the traditional, normal academic setting to support that. And so to Tony's point, it really is sort of a 2-tiered approach based on demonstrated need, and we're constantly going in and asking ourselves, are these tiers the right ones, or do we need to escalate, de-escalate? And we'll continue to do that throughout this year.
And I also want to just add this in closing. But I don't want to, I'm going to make the first statement, and I'm going to give the caveat, I don't want to minimize the urgency. We all acknowledge that we embarked on a process that most national research says is at least a 3-year process of turnaround. Okay, so we all acknowledge that, yet I will be the first to admit I have a personal impatience. And so
2 weeks.
Yes.
Yes, that's why we love you.
So, we acknowledge that, and I think, because we're going to hear from Paul Vallis here shortly on the Marshall issue, but I also want to commend all of the operators, because we took on 5 schools, and I think we can easily say 4 of those 5 schools are where we believe they could be and should be at this point in the school year. And I think if you ask anyone around the country that's involved in this work, that's a pretty darn good ratio to start. And it's a pretty good framework to build from toward that goal of turning around these schools in the long term. And I say that with the understanding that I believe these children have been given up on for far too long, and I don't ever want to minimize the sense of urgency we should have. So I just want to have a very balanced statement that one is, yes, this is hard work. This is hard work across the nation, and there are very few people doing this work across the country. And two, we are doing it as aggressively as anyone, probably more so. And three, we should never lose the sense of urgency that we, can sit back and wait 3 years. Because you know what? The kids who are juniors in these schools, they don't have 3 years.
That's right.
So let's just keep those things in mind.
And Dr. Bennett, may I say also, I don't want people to think that how isn't being addressed, because it absolutely is. When I was just talking about the Quest visit, some of the people on the Quest visit had been in our building helping us out there 2 weeks ago, and they came in and they told the administrative team they are amazed at just the positive differences in 2 weeks that have been made. And although there are still issues, we're not sugarcoating that by any means. Progress is being made at that school, and people are working hard to make sure that progress is made for those students.
But one of the things come up here repeatedly the last 3 months, at some point it'd be neat to have an executive summary of lessons learned. We'll even have a few more as the year unrolls. And then in that executive summary, with input from our good folks that have, and even the school districts that lost control of the school to this new, they probably have a few lessons for us too. Take it all, analyze it. Then what are the policy and law changes we ought to consider? Because Mike was right. It's going to be tough when you take over. What can we do in terms of the rules of the game so there's even more opportunity for success and less of the, because I bet you there's a lot of insights that until we did this we would not have. And I just want to make sure we have a point in time where we write that down, analyze it, think about it, and then get a set of recommendations. I know that's somewhere in the plan. That would show up the minutes and maybe create a deadline for the first draft of it. And we could get busy down the road and forget to really analyze that and think about it. Maybe by October.
Yeah,
maybe. I don't want to belabor this, but I think it's worth, Tony, you made the point that 4 of the 5 schools are kind of where we would expect them to be. I actually think they've exceeded expectations in a number of ways. I haven't had a chance yet to visit. I do intend to do that, hopefully relatively soon, but based on conversations with DOE staff and based on things I've been reading, it seems to me that actually expectations, if anything, are exceeded. So I kind of endorse the idea that while we can't lose sight of the goal and continue to press, I think we're off to some very good starts in some very tough environments, and I commend all of the TSOs for their work so far. Keep it up.
Julie, when you say you're asking for additional security, who are you asking?
Corporate.
Oh, so Charter School USA?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a process.
Which again, okay, I'll check my sarcasm. I'll start again. Which, in the school business world, while they're calling it corporate, as an old building principal, I used to call that the central office.
Right.
Yeah. But it's, I don't want them to take a lot of heat for it either. We're working through budget issues, and they see the need, they hear the need, and they are getting those.
But the initial plan was to have these 4 or 5 people.
Yeah, that was all that was budgeted in there.
Before we get into lead partners, I'm just going to make a suggestion for our discussion for this. Do we need these guys every month, or do we need them every other month? And could Jim maybe alternate who we bring in, so you're not bringing the same people every month, so those guys aren't making treks from Gary? So I'm just thinking of time's sake too.
Can I answer that personally, Mike? I at least think through the first of the year, I would like to see a monthly update, because again, going back to the day of running a district, running schools, it is so vital we get these schools off to a great start that I would prefer a little information overload to the board, especially through the until the first of the year. And then if we decide where we want to be at the first of the year, it gives us a little different. Maybe we can can look at them, every other month, but I would personally prefer a monthly update, at least until we get through the holidays.
And what I can do, what we're planning to do already is to send the data dashboards in advance and not do it in a slides format here, but rather than with them sent in advance, then just open it up for a Q&A based on the data that you'll have in advance as opposed to the slideshow. But given the newness of it and that we're first into operations, we thought today was important to have at least a few slides.
And I appreciate that. And, back to that, Tony, then, another alternative is that a group of this board hear the information, and, not in this large public setting. So.
If it's just reporting and there's no policy or other decisional or informational activity that you guys think you need to bring to the board, I wouldn't worry if you backed it down a little, because I know you're talking to them, and we can read. So I agree with Mike. I guess I agree with both Mike and Tony. Do it as long as you need to do it, but we're a policy board. We don't need to have the data by itself every month just for the sake of the data.
So I wanted to close just by reiterating something that Dr. Bennett mentioned earlier, which is this question of urgency. I want you to know, first and foremost, you are always welcome to go with us or independently to visit any of the schools. I had the chance to visit a few of them this morning with Dave, and look forward to doing in Bennett and Roosevelt with Tony. And I just appreciate so much the time that you spent there that day. Went to lunch, came back still there, just being a part of opening day, and not just for the press conference, but really being in the hallway, seeing the work at hand. And so I appreciate that very much, and know that we will be in these schools daily here in Indianapolis and spending a long period of time weekly at Roosevelt. When I say we, I don't just mean the Office of School Improvement Turnaround, and Nicole Norvell and Ann Davis and Gary Green and Rich Oak, just people all across the department, food service, because this touches every program area, and are going in and creating and completing audits, and we're aggregating that data. So if there's any time you want to take a look at that and have a deeper conversations, we'd be happy to do that.
I wonder also, I think that's the best way to do it, but I also wonder, I just ask you to consider, whether we ought to either A, have a board meeting at one of the schools, again, to show support and to show interest. And we are running these schools through the TSOs, but there are responsibility, and or then some kind of program. Maybe we have an extended board meeting one day, as long as people have enough advance notice, and we have some programs. I know that's not a replacement for in some ways it's better to come in a little unannounced or individually, that you can see more and talk more, but it also might make sense for us to, at least once this fall, do it together as a group.
Absolutely. We'll get to work on that. And the urgency will continue to be there, and will continue to be there where we are, again, on that daily basis, seeing serious substantive issues, and we'll be working with the operators, as we are currently at Howe, to find ways to take what's working, what's possible, what we know drives success at Manual and at Medina and in Roosevelt and Arlington, to get that there in a manner that provides these students with the education that we all firmly believe that they deserve. And we look forward to continuing that process and work with you. Thank you.
Thanks for all your work. I think we also, I think we ought to acknowledge Jim and and all of the people who have been working to make this such a successful start. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. And approve.